Hey everyone, welcome to my talk, DevOps Philosophy versus Practice, brought to you by the folks at ScoutAPM. My name is PJ Hagerty, and let's just get right into it. First of all, let's define DevOps as it stands today. According to the strict definition of DevOps, it's a concatenation of development and operations, a method that emphasizes collaboration between the entire spectrum of professionals involved in the creation, development, and deployment of software. That seems pretty straightforward, right? The definition, though, it hardly fits the modern concept. Before going too much further, it's kind of important to define the so-called parts of DevOps. It seems pretty simple because you have dev and ops, development and operations. You know what those things are. But sometimes you question development. Does that include UI UX? What even is development? Is it just the backend code? Where does this fit in with DevOps? Ops can mean a lot of things as well. Operations, site reliability, the hierarchy of exactly how things work, all the way from basement dwelling cable jockeys, as they used to be called, to the people that are actually putting servers together and getting them actively going on, whether that's locally or in the cloud. All of that falls under ops. And then there's that part that didn't quite fit into the DevOps concatenation, QA, testing, quality assurance, making sure the thing actually works. So today we think of DevOps as a set of behaviors and tools that allow a team to function, a tech team specifically, obviously. The idea differs from the agile mindset, which kind of focuses on the ability to move a project along flexibly, and it can be subject to change at any time depending on feedback, which is good. As a result, agile teams are small, fast, and open to change, but it's mostly focused on the software development cycle. DevOps brings that beyond development and encompasses all the steps from concept to delivery. So this philosophy stretches even beyond that work cycle. The focus is on how the members of the team function, how they interact, and how they can be most successful. Pulling all this together requires a tool set, and that tool set can be an extremely long chain. There's no single answer to what's the right tool set. It's more about what works for your organization. But let's talk about some examples that I've had some personal success with to give you an impression of how all these things work together. Um, in the modern DevOps scenario, development language is not as important. Factually, you can use combinations of languages to get specific jobs done within your application. Let me bring the point home. An application in a modern startup uses a combination of languages: Ruby, Java, PHP, little bit of JavaScript tossed in for fun, maybe a little bit of something, different, like, a C sharp or something on the back end. That's not an unusual recipe for putting something together. If you need an example, look at Twitter. Those are the things that actually build Twitter every day. Um, Languages aside, the key here is making applications that are usable in order to make our users' lives better and easier. We say that a lot, but we don't really think about making our developers' lives easier. And this is where tools like version control come in. At the moment, the most prominent is Git. We all know about Git and GitHub and GitLab and Bitbucket and things like that. But there's still a lot of people out in the world that use Subversion, so that's okay too. Finding what works best in your organization is really what's important. And we can argue all day about trunk-based development, branch-based development. It's more focusing on what development works and how you get the best product out in as little amount of time. The next thing we talk about now that we've kind of got our code settled is all the tools that come with testing. And while testing has been a hot topic among software engineers for so long, there's a lot of parts of testing that tools such as RSpec and other things don't really necessarily do because they're just testing the code that the developers make. Point of fact, I should mention I'm a bad person. I hate talking about testing almost as much as I hate writing tests, and I hate writing tests. But as a developer, sometimes that's something you need to do. Um, Now, going beyond the code itself to see if the application actually works in a way that users find it useful, there's a lot of tools, things like Selenium, which is application and browser testing, but also WAPT, which is a load testing and stress testing tool. Qtest is a suite of tools used for quality control specifically on the application while it's out in the world. Additionally, there are services out there like Rainforest QA that perform the testing for you so you don't have to do it yourself. This is only a partial list, but ensuring the stability of an application before it even gets to an SRE, much less the public, is super crucial. So let's talk about some of the more DevOpsy things that people like to think about when they think about tools. Continuous integration, which isn't really a new concept, but it does add to the DevOps tool set in important ways. Companies like Travis CI and Circle CI have been working for so many years to develop seamless integration to new code into the current operating stack. And when you're talking about all those different languages, like we talked about earlier, it's really important. Now, these things can be on sandbox stacks, in production, however you want it. It's about integrating the code so you can feel it's a really solid deploy once you push it out. Continuous delivery works the same way. You start to approach the end game of our DevOps setup. Like CI, there are great stable CD tools out there, such as GoCD, which is not to be confused with the Go programming language, and things like Chef and Puppet. Terraform, everybody loves to talk about Terraform, great CD tool. Once we have this, we need infrastructure. And this is where the ops really starts to heavily come in. If DevOps is a buzzword, and some people think it is, even though it's 10 years old, it's in good company. Cloud services, containerization, Docker, Kubernetes, serverless. These are all buzzwords that really, if you boil them down, mean hosting solutions. Like programming languages, these answers are organizationally dependent. While serverless might be the wave of the future, according to some people, some larger companies are just getting into the idea of cloud, whether that be public or private. It's important to note here that enterprise level business often moves at a glacial pace in comparison to the startup world where people adopt things very quickly. Regardless of what arena, the DevOps philosophy, the adoption of cloud infrastructure, the use of open source software solutions, generally, big tech companies are going to be slower. So if you're in a bigger tech organization, keep that in mind as you try to move along. Um, Monitoring is super important. These operators, systems administrators, DBAs, SREs, deployment and infrastructure experts, they often need their own set of tools to see what's going on with an application when it's out there in the world. This is where the monitoring solutions are key. To take it a step further, there's tools like ScoutAPM that help to provide insights into what our applications are doing and why, and we can drill down deeper to find out what the underlying causes might be. And this is important when things are out there in the wider world because you never know how things are going to react. The ability to see into our application performance and infrastructure is like super important. And we feed that back to the team so we can improve each thing and make more successes as the market of the application changes. This is another place where we need to watch out for buzzwords, though. People love to say things like real time and instant feedback when there's an underlying delay. Um, some of these different things give different things a different time. You need to work on what works for your organization. The key is finding out what happens before someone on the other end does. And the real trick to that is having the most important piece of your DevOps toolkit, and that's communication. This is the most interesting part of the tool set that you can use to implement the DevOps philosophy. The tools here are all well known, everything from Mattermost to Slack to HipChat to IRC. All of them are used to keep the working parts together. If you think of DevOps as an engine, communication is the oil or the catalyst that keeps that engine running smoothly. This is the key to a successful DevOps implementation. It's funny that we include communication as part of the DevOps cycle, really, because really there's no organization inside or outside of tech, personal or professional life, where communication is not the most important thing. Let's be honest. Isn't it really the most important tool to any successful team? Whether working remote, on a distributed team, or in a single office, communication is always the key to success. Whether it's helping your organization to understand what the DevOps philosophy is, or helping your teammates to understand where you fit into the philosophy as it works in your organization, communication is the key. Now, we went through a lot of things and a lot of tools. It's important to remember that the tools are only as important as the people, and the people are only as important as their ability to communicate their needs and what they want to do with the tools that they have. So, thank you very much for your time, and I hope you enjoyed this talk about DevOps philosophy versus practice.